expand on that idea and layer ideas. Oh, I could use this image behind this live action, these costumes, this disjointed thing could go with this jointed thing, and that's how I would get something started. So there's slipping glimpses, or so it started, really, my history started back in undergrad at Western Michigan University. My painting teacher said, "You'll want to come to this happening." So happenings started happening in the 60s. The original happenings started maybe in the 20s or late teens, and the resurgence was in the 60s. These multi-sensory audience participation, layered imagery with live action, music, and often things, surprises, things you wouldn't put together. And I was hooked. It took place in my campus, a little campus gym, and we entered through a maze and entered into that gym where there were films going on, there were people moving, and just odd things happening, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So jump a few years after that, I started teaching elementary school, and I was lucky enough to be in a school in Holly, Michigan, Patterson Elementary, with a team of educators that were so imaginative and creative and open-minded, and one is here today, Lori, and Lori Eckelman now, Lori Solomon at the time. And we would brainstorm and come up with happenings. Now I taught art, so I could handle the costumes and the visuals, but I had the music teachers, I had the classroom teachers, and we designed multi-sensory audience participation in the gym for the children, with children material, so that they would, So we did that 3 times with the blessing of our principal, who actually went out in the playground and disassembled the slide so the kids could slide into the gym in the middle of a maze that they'd have to enter through the hallways through. It was magical, and it always ended in a big parade, and it helped. The idea was to unite the school. That was my thought behind it, and it did. I think the children were they were a solid unit after each one of those. So now jump into my graduate work at Wayne State University, and I started it with a trip to Italy with Mr. and Mrs. Nobili, who taught at Wayne and Center for Creative Studies. There were about 30 students and artists on that trip. It was life-changing for me. I found kindred spirits on that trip, and what I would call the beginnings of the cathartic circle. I dressed like an angel on the man, all the spray paint, all the cardboard, everything was found and made there. And the rest of that, and I had photographs taken of me around the whole city. And at the end of the evening, everyone took their bed sheets off their beds, and we had a big toga party. So that was the first time I did anything with adults. So now I'm in grad school, and I'm going, how am I going to drive an hour out to Holly and back to my studio at the Atlas building by Eastern Market. So I said, I'm going to focus on what I love best, which is breakfast and morning. So the first performance I did for adults was my final review. I wheeled a wheelbarrow full of pancakes into the teacher's lounge, and had a sign inviting them to my studio for my final review. This painting was part of that final review. And they came up 5 flights of stairs to the sound of Good Morning by the Beatles. And they were treated to a breakfast. They sat at a long table like the Last Supper with butter all lined up on it. Carl the Millionaire, who I had met on my Italy trip and continued being friends to this day, stuck out his arm out of I had made a refrigerator box puppet stage, medieval puppet stage. He stuck that arm out with the syrup and to Vivaldi's Spring poured the syrup onto the pancakes while toast was burning, and I was wearing my breakfast goddess gown, made again out of a bedsheet. After that, Marilyn Zimmerman, who was on that review, Top Photography, came up and said, I have to be involved. How do you do these things? I want to be involved. And she did, remained involved, was in many of the performances. But one thing that she did, and she also invited me to teach performance art after I had retired from teaching, which was quite an honor at Wayne State. But she introduced me to a very pivotal person, Rose de Slover. Rose is here today, and she is on the mantle in place of honor. Rose was very instrumental at Marygrove College to have the openness and understanding of time-based art. She embraced the ideas I had. She helped fund them. She wrote grants, and she offered all that Marygrove could offer me behind the scenes. She gave me students. She gave me prop builders. She offered the graphic department and anything to run a theater. So thank you, Rose. Without her, I couldn't have done that. My family now, who are also here, they got warmed up. They got finally learned what this all meant. They baked. They helped run projectors. They did all sorts of things. And I'll mention one thing later on. But so the first performances were simple. They were based on a color with a message. Red, blue. The red one was, if you sleep on it, you'll figure out how to handle the problem. The blue was opposites. The good will prevail over evil, for instance. Then my green dress, so it was usually a gown or a dress that would kick it off, and then I would go from there. And there's a green goddess dress that was part of an environmental message, where the urban bandits would strap that urban corset around my green belt, squeezing out the green belt. And so playing with those words and playing with those images was how I developed these things. I'm hoping I'm not forgetting. But there was no dialogue or speaking parts, so after a while I got a little braver and started writing speaking parts. And the piece I'm going to show you clips from is called It Takes One to Be One, and it was about the time I had an ear surgery. So I had a big bandage on my ear, and I said, this looks like someone. Looks like Van Gogh. So we took a picture with my pipe and my hat, and I looked just like Van Gogh. And you're welcome to one of these. It has a Van Gogh kit in it with a razor blade and
a Band-Aid.
And a Band-Aid, right?
And a Band-Aid.
So there are several of them in Also, I had just heard that Van Gogh was one of the highest priced artists at auction. I thought, this man who just suffered through life now is making the highest dollar at auction. So that was it. I started it. So we'll play one clip about fame and what makes you famous.
You noticed when I was young. I noticed, but you weren't looking. I could hear your footsteps. I knew it was you coming. Thousands of dollars and dollars and dollars and dollars later, I'm still noticed. Do you just like me? Or my ear? Pay attention to me. You notice?
We'll stop.
And I.
And while Bree is fast forwarding to the next, it was also not only about why we seek fame, but what we inherit. The next, I thought I was going to be the end of the bloodline, but 3 years after this piece, I had a baby nephew that was born. So I was no longer the end of the bloodline. But this is, one of the scenes was about inheriting genes.
Vermilion, alizarin, Uncle Bob's.
This is at the gene pool with the lifeguard.
Full-sized adult will have 18-inch arms, 29-inch waist, shoe size 9, glove size 7. Built-up paint surface with thin glazing. A sweet lifeline. An angel of a name.
Why can't I be flawless? Will I have buttons? I never thought I'd dye my hair, cap my teeth, go to therapy, remove the lump. One gene may affect many traits. For example, it may determine both color and longevity. Chromosomes color your life.
We can stop there. And we can go to the last part, which no matter what you've inherited and what you're thinking about for your own fame or being remembered, just go for it and celebrate your own life, which is what the final scene is portraying as the chandelier woman celebrates her own fame with her own headline. So that's an example of how I took ideas, expanded on them, created this, I beaded that whole dress, and hunting for all the supplies and gathering people, and all of these pieces had audience participation. The audience was very important to me, and the big reason behind everything was to draw the art community together and share a big celebration. And I think these last few pieces did actually do that. The theaters were filled. I could only afford 3 nights of big audiovisual equipment that were many times delivered in kind. And films were big projections in the back with the live action and audience participation. So I collaborate now, but my big collaborator is my husband, Rick Vian. And he said, we'll only get married under one condition. And I thought, maybe he doesn't want a church wedding, I don't know. But he said, no, that I get to wear a gorilla costume to the ceremony, or to the reception. So I wore a coral dress, and he wore a gorilla costume with hands and feet, and almost upstaged me at our wedding. Which is okay.
Almost.
And at
Kinda.
the wedding, my priest brother-in-law, Father Godbad, said, this is not a performance. This is the real thing. Even though he performed every Sunday on that. I don't go on stage anymore, but I do use the same slippery glimpses when I do my drawings and my paintings. You just have to grab it when you can, and then expand on it. So thanks a lot. I hope that cleared some of the reasons why all of this happened. At one point, we were just having to fit our action between recorded sound. Once Nelson Smith stepped in and composed music, it took all of these pieces to another height. And Rick was part of that. The Immigrant Sons were part of the soundtrack. Frank Paul was part of that soundtrack. Also, Jeff Bloomer, every summer, we would line everything up until summer. We both taught, and Jeff Bloomer and I would work on the films. Some that even made it to the Ann Arbor Film Festival and we won one prize, which was a real honor. So,
Can we ask a question?
yeah, question.